My name is Stretto. Welcome to episode 8 of Pink Elephant Foxtrot. Apocalypse and Post-Apocalypse. In late October of 2021, a glowing sphere appeared in the skies above my neighborhood. It would return to the same coordinates nightly throughout the month of November, and on the evening of November 13th, it became clear that it wasn't alone. The disc-shaped object flying in an arc above the sphere was visible with the naked eye, and when I viewed the stills on my computer that evening, I got the overwhelming feeling that there were additional objects that would never be captured using just a cell phone. My first two attempts using an SLR camera were imperfect, because I didn't have access to a tripod until November 14th, 2021. But on the evening of the 13th, I found a way to steady the lens and took some intriguing images of an additional object above and to the left of the sphere. It wasn't visible at the time I took the photo. The images from that night are a bit fuzzy, but they are clear enough to display what appear to be well-defined, hard right angles. It would be easy to dismiss this as lens flare, a reflection coming from the sphere, but I was able to photograph this same angular object on multiple evenings after I got a tripod and a remote control to trigger the camera. Here it is emerging from behind the sphere on November 17th, 2021. This longer sequence was taken recently on October 6th, 2023, and shows the triangular or pyramid-shaped object passing behind a craft first sighted southwest of the sphere in 2021. But perhaps the best argument against lens flare is that lens flare doesn't shrink. It cannot miniaturize and maintain clear right angles and a consistent triangular shape, particularly when photographs are taken in rapid succession with a camera mounted on a tripod. In episode 4, I introduced the concept of Sherlock's razor, a mashup of Occam's razor and the deductive reasoning of fictional detective Sherlock Holmes. If we apply Sherlock's razor to these photographs and videos and rule out the impossible, then whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. So what can we deduce from these photographs and videos? All three objects return to the same exact coordinates nightly. The sphere was captured arriving in daylight, and the second object moved out of frame within minutes each time it was filmed. The motion of two of the objects was visible to the naked eye. The third was visible only when photographed, but had consistent shape, including right angles. And multiple images from 2021, 2022, and 2023 depict this third object, what I call the triangle pyramid, emerging from behind each of the other two objects. Deduction number 1. The sphere, the second object, and the triangle pyramid, all of which were first photographed in late October 2021, cannot be planets, stars, or the products of reflection. Deduction number 2. The repetitive, predictable motion of the triangle pyramid in relation to the other two objects indicates that it is intelligently controlled. What exactly are these objects? And what's up with the strange choreography? The answer to this puzzle is anything but elementary, but the magnifying glass is out, and the game is afoot. Next on Pink Elephant Foxtrot, Loud Hailer. In episode 8, we examine the roots of culture war in an essay culled from the book version of Storyboard of a Dream. It is called Apocalypse and Post-Apocalypse. Most civilizations eventually face an apocalypse. Some theorize that the decline of the Mayan civilization was due to a severe drought that lasted for centuries, causing the Maya to abandon their cities and flee north. But the jury is still out. Sometimes an apocalypse involves a natural disaster that is instantaneous, like the eruption of Mount Vesuvius that buried Pompeii in 79 AD. Today the apocalypse we face is of our own doing, environmental, political, and cultural. Think of it as a huge cup of Vietnamese coffee. It's been on a slow drip for quite some time, and it's about to overflow. The bad news is that, as a race, we have a history of not mopping things up immediately, or at all. We usually don't respond until we hear an announcement along the lines of, "Clean up on aisle everything." And right now, the world is not responding to cleanups on any aisle. The ultimate cleanup has to do with energy. Have you ever wondered how it is that there have been so few innovations in clean energy over the last 50 years? Many inventors toil under the naive assumption that the world will be waiting for their invention with open arms. But in 1952, Congress established the Invention Secrecy Act, which gives the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office the power to confiscate and suppress patents deemed detrimental to national security. That's a pretty vague description. In 2017, the organization Free the Tech found that there were 5,784 patents that were not available for the public to see. Some of these are related to weapons and classified for military reasons, but many are for clean energy devices that could have gotten us off fossil fuels and nuclear energy several generations ago. How is this possible? When millionaire J.P. Morgan invested in Nikola Tesla's plan to develop a better way to distribute energy, he had but one question: where do we put the meter? The world economy is locked into the economic status quo of fossil fuels, but the status quo must change if the planet is to survive. Are these patents simply going to be suffocating in a safe as the waters rise? Surely we must have developed a way to address J.P. Morgan's bottom line by now. I think I speak for the entire world when I say, we don't mind if you put a meter on it. We may already have the knowledge to avoid this apocalypse if we simply re-explore those patents, but I'm not so sure about the societal apocalypse headed our way. The roots of our modern culture wars begin in 1985, when the Federal Communications Commission rubber-stamped Rupert Murdoch's purchase of 7 affiliate Fox television stations. The problem is, foreign investors at that time were prohibited from owning more than 20% of a television station in the U.S., or more than 5% of a broadcast station in the same city as their print media. To get around this, Murdoch, by that point the owner of several newspapers including the New York Post and the Chicago Sun-Times, paid Denver oil tycoon Marvin Davis $250 million to be his beard and give the appearance that there was domestic investment in the acquisition. The FCC either ignored or was misled by the fact that all of the financial backing for Murdoch's venture, which also included the purchase of 12 additional newspapers, came from a foreign Australian-owned company, News Corp. Murdoch was also given a unique exemption as far as his citizenship requirement, which was mysteriously waived by the FCC, allowing him to apply for U.S. citizenship after he acquired the stations. By September of 1985, the charade was exposed. Murdoch bought out Marvin Davis's 50% stake in Fox for $325 million. None of this was questioned or investigated by the FCC until 1995, when it was discovered by new members on the commission who belonged to a different political party, and by then, News Corp was far too big to fail. Fox's first sitcom, Married with Children, aired in 1987 and made Three's Company look like Citizen Kane. In between toilet humor and sexually charged zingers aimed at an eroticized teenager, they cranked and enhanced the over-the-top canned laughter, creating the blueprint for blue-collar humor aimed at the lowest common denominator. But Rupert Murdoch was far more shrewd than anyone gave him credit for. He diversified Fox's programming to reach out to the very demographics he sought to eventually undermine. The merchandising and syndication of The Simpsons enabled Fox to grow exponentially on the heels of unedited liberal content. Their decision to invest in culturally hip ethnic comics like George Lopez and In Living Color's Damon Wayans, in hindsight, seems very calculated and cynical. Fox and their parent News Corp developed a pattern of exploiting ethnic diversity and free speech in order to promote an opposite political agenda. But none of this mattered. Rupert Murdoch and News Corp were rubber-stamped by the FCC for a reason, and it wasn't to promote ethnically diverse programming or cover protest marches. The Republican Party was quite aware of Rupert Murdoch's views, if not his intentions, but even they underestimated him. The tail is wagging the dog. News Corp had their own agenda, and still does, and they will pay any price to keep that agenda secret. Tucker Carlson is disembodied now, but the curtain has been drawn. It's hard to guess what the boys from Australia have in mind for a post-Tucker Carlson post-apocalypse sequel. Rest assured, it won't be G-rated, but you can bet it will be in black and white. Next on Pink Elephant Foxtrot, Culture Crunch. On this installment, we take a look at the collapse and expansion of pocket universes in an essay called Tether. Proponents of the multiverse believe that the universe expands infinitely and behaves like a fractal, creating what the late physicist Stephen Hawking called multiple pocket universes. It's an intriguing theory, but Hawking knew it would remain just that. As he put it, if the scale of different universes in the multiverse is large or infinite, the theory can't be tested. Perhaps not scientifically. Art picks up where science leaves off, and this theory makes the most sense when it is brought back down to Earth. On any given day, human beings are presented with thousands of stimuli to respond to and interact with, regardless of your circumstance in life. This includes our relationships with other people, and the way we choose to react and respond to them determines our universe. Applying the concept of the multiverse to the collective free will of human beings is all fine and well, but it's sort of like believing in the future portrayed on Star Trek. A world with no disease and no hunger without any need for money sounds nice, but more often than not, the pocket universes we find ourselves in are the result of catastrophic contraction. Our fight to turn this contraction into a renewed expansion is anything but personal. Learning the history of people who have overcome unbelievable adversity can put the contractions of your own life in perspective and shorten the tether that pulls you out. But the tether is the thing. There has to be a tether. Louis Armstrong was raised by a single mother in a poor area of New Orleans called the Battlefield. In 1912, when he was 11, Armstrong was arrested on New Year's Eve after firing a stolen gun. He was sent to a reform school called the Colored Waifs Home. The harsh conditions and strict rules could have broken anyone's spirit, but there was a tether in the form of a school band. Louis took cornet lessons and soon became the band leader. It is hard to describe the relevance and influence Armstrong's talent had on the world. The artistry in his early recordings is still unprecedented and unparalleled. Armstrong would become one of the highest paid and most celebrated artists in the world. He was the first black musician to cross over into white American culture, acting as a tether for countless other black artists. Armstrong also represented the United States on several international tours sponsored by the State Department. He sold millions of records worldwide and performed for royalty. None of this would have happened were it not for the music instructor at the Waifs home, a man named Peter Davis, or the kindness of a Jewish family Louis worked for, the Karnofskys, who owned a local business and bought him his first cornet. Three tethers which combined led to infinite expansion: education, encouragement, and music. The third would not have saved Louis Armstrong without the other two. He is one of America's greatest success stories. Louis Armstrong represents the American dream, but there were efforts made throughout his life to cancel his career, in part because of his complex views on race. Many felt that his stage persona was a sort of pandering Uncle Tom. That view is still espoused by some, but Armstrong's relationship with race was far more complex. In 1954, in a case called Brown versus Board of Education, a very different Supreme Court than the one we have today ruled that segregation was illegal. 3 years later, in 1957, 9 black students were chosen to integrate into Little Rock Central High School in Arkansas. On September 4th, the students were verbally attacked and spit upon by a racist crowd as they tried to enter the school. As if that weren't humiliating enough, Arkansas Governor Orville M. Faubus had ordered the National Guard to block the entrance, and despite the Supreme Court's decision, the students were not allowed to enter the building to attend classes that day. Louis Armstrong was so upset he canceled his State Department tour of the Soviet Union. Larry Lubinow, then a senior at University of North Dakota majoring in journalism, interviewed Armstrong after the cancellation. Lubinow had been instructed by his editor not to discuss politics, but he asked Armstrong only one question about music before the interview pivoted to what was occurring in Arkansas. Armstrong didn't edit himself. In later interviews, Lubinow said Armstrong called Governor Faubus a no-good MFer, which his editors sanitized to uneducated plowboy. Armstrong didn't have many kind words for President Eisenhower either, and when word of the interview spread, it was very polarizing. Armstrong's anger and anguish were palpable. On September 24, 1957, he sent the following telegram to the White House. It has a White House stamp, so it was definitely received. Mr. President, Daddy, if and when you decide to take those little Negro children personally into Central High School along with your marvelous troops, please take me along. Oh God, it would be such a great pleasure, I assure you. That's the thing about a tether. It is a gift that keeps giving. Many feel that Armstrong's telegram was the main impetus for Eisenhower's decision to send in the 101st Airborne to escort the children to school. Perhaps Eisenhower couldn't help but grab on to the tether Lewis threw. We will probably never know for sure, but in a way, it doesn't matter. Louis Armstrong opened a door to a universe that had previously been painted shut. Armstrong's journey and subsequent success was a beacon to other black artists, who would in turn inspire Lewis to write that telegram and open that door even wider. One was a young girl from Philadelphia who listened to the recordings Lewis made with blues singer Bessie Smith to help cope with a traumatic childhood. Her name was Eleanor Fagan, and she would eventually change it to Billie Holiday. Louis Armstrong's telegram to President Eisenhower was definitely a pivotal moment in the struggle for civil rights. But if you are looking for ground zero, look no further than Billie Holiday's first 1939 recording of Strange Fruit. Against all odds, and against the advice of her manager and record label, a sobering song about lynchings in the South became a huge hit. But there was an enormous price to pay. Holiday's unbelievable courage made her quite vulnerable. Childhood trauma is a volatile thing, and it has overtaken so many artists before their time. Getting yanked out of a collapsing universe isn't the hardest part of a renewed expansion. The canyon between the trajectories of Louis Armstrong and Billie Holiday's lives bears this out. The hardest part of infinite expansion in a new pocket universe is coming to terms with the trauma caused by your prior pocket and not allowing it to put a hole in your new one. Thanks for tuning in to Episode 8 of Pink Elephant Foxtrot. You can show your support for the show by hitting that subscribe button. Music was by Tom Young. If you would like to become a sponsor of the show, get in touch. Stretto@pinkelephantfoxtrot.com. Coming up on Episode 9 of Pink Elephant Foxtrot, History Rhymes. The fallout from the presidential election of 1824 has so many eerie parallels to the election of 2020 that it could almost be mistaken for a prequel. On the next installment of Loud Hailer, we examine the rhyme of history. And on Culture Crunch, is it possible to separate a work of art from the imperfections of its creator? Find out on Episode 9 of Pink Elephant Foxtrot.